Many people among Putin's inner circle pretty much begging him to suspend the offensive operations and switch to defense. But will he listen? That is the question. At the same time, Ukrainians are preparing a surprise in Bakhmut, and in the meantime, Russians are doing another provocation in the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, and they're just simply trying to make Chernobyl 2.0. But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. Let's get straight to the point and talk about something ridiculous. So recently, a 70-year-old babushka in Russia, she was probably watching some old TV shows with Zelensky, and she said that actually he's a good-looking guy. And well, it might not sound something like special unless you are in Russia, because neighbors did not like it, and 3 denunciations have been sent to the Russian government, and as a result of this, babushka was fined for 40,000 rubles, which is approximately $600. Apparently, someone is very jealous of Zelensky's beauty. The next news, which is still a little bit infused with the Russian propaganda, is that the general of the Russian army, Mikhail Mizintsev, has been fired. And what makes this particular news so special is that this guy is the Deputy Minister of Defense of Russia, and he was responsible for the attacks against Mariupol and also in some way for defenses. Well, one of these things kinda succeeded, not for long, but it did, and another one is failing, so no surprise, he is already one of these scapegoats. And ultimately, if you remember from my yesterday's episode, Putin in the middle of the night was rushed into Kremlin along with his convoy. And so today, according to the press secretary of Russia Dmitry Peskov, the reason for this, it is because Putin finished his work at home and he went to Kremlin to have some sleep. I mean, in the regular world this is kinda the opposite. You work at work and you sleep at home. But what do we know about the preferences of the Russian president? And so yes, if you're also going to work to sleep after working at home, can you please like this video and subscribe to my channel? Well, do it in any case, please. You can also check my second channel, The Russian Dude Clips, where I post under 1-minute summaries every single day. The link will be down below. And now let's briefly talk about the update in the east of Ukraine and what is this surprise in Bakhmut. But first of all, we have a video from the capital of Russia, Moscow, where a huge drone, probably Strish, has been spotted in its sky. And obviously, the Russian propaganda was not able to explain where this huge drone came from or why Russian air defense system failed to intercept it. Next we go back to Ukraine, and as you can see from this video, these are British self-propelled howitzers AS-90s, which are already being used by Ukrainians in the front lines. And then, according to the report by the Institute for the Study of War, Russians did not conduct any offensive along Svatove-Kreminna road. Next we go to the hottest point in the entire Ukraine, the city of Bakhmut, and according to the leader of Wagner, Yevgeny Prigozhin, his private military company will suspend the artillery fire, while American journalists will be inside the city. And later on, Prigozhin said that this was a joke. This is some kind of a military humor. And so, yes, please let me know in the comments if you are also rolling on the floor, laughing after hearing this joke. But okay, back to Bakhmut, and according to the representative of Ukrainian Special Forces at the Levais, they are preparing a surprise for Russians. At this very moment it is obviously not certain what this surprise is, otherwise it obviously stops being a surprise. But my assumption would be that Ukrainians will allow Russians to advance a little bit, and then, knowing the Russian tactic whenever they capture new positions, that they do not spend much time fortifying it, probably Ukrainians will go behind their front lines at night and eliminate those forces which recently advanced. Once again, this is just my own personal assumption. And just overall, according to Ukrainian sources, in the last 24 hours alone, Ukrainians were able to destroy 11 concentration of Russian forces and military equipment, 2 artillery systems, and 2 more other important military targets. And most likely, some of these targets have been destroyed using Ukrainian drones, and right here I have the compilation of such videos of most recent Ukrainian drone attacks. The full video will be available on my Patreon, there is still 1 week of free access, and the link is down below. Now let's talk about the situation in the south and why Russians want to do Chernobyl 2.0, and then we'll talk about why Putin is forced to suspend the offensive operations and what is his most likely response. But first of all, right here we have a video from Mykolaiv, and as you can see, unfortunately a residential building has been severely damaged as a result of a Russian attack. Then we once again refer to the same report by the Institute for the Study of War, and it says that Russian propagandists are now arguing between themselves whether Ukrainians were able to cross the Dnipro river or not, which to be honest is even better sign that we could have asked. In the past, Russian propagandists were declining these possibilities, and now they are already arguing between themselves. But then, according to the Ukrainian mayor of Melitopol, Ivan Fedorov, Russians, specifically Chechens, are bringing reinforcements in this city, most likely in the anticipation for Ukrainian counteroffensive. And in the best traditions of the Russian forces, they simply occupy hotels and ask the residents to move out, and one of the reasons why they reside in such places is so that Ukrainians technically will not be able to attack civilian infrastructure. And speaking about civilian infrastructure, recently, according to the British intelligence report, Russians started putting sandbags on top of Zaporozhye nuclear power plant and establishing fire positions in the very close proximity to this station. This information is also confirmed by this satellite image, where you can clearly see such sandbags. And even though Zaporozhye nuclear power plant has been under Russian occupation almost since the beginning of this war, this is the very first time Russians are actively preparing to defend it. And I mean, I don't think Ukrainians will be stupid enough to destroy the nuclear power plant on their own territory, especially if they're planning to liberate it, because then they will obviously need this energy supply source. So then, why would they attack it? But what makes even more sense is that Russians doing this to show that, oh, Ukrainians are going to attack us, we have to protect ourselves and protect the station. But then whenever Ukrainians start inevitably to advance in Zaporozhye, Russians most likely will do some loud noises inside this power plant station just to do it as a provocation against Ukrainians. So all these preparations is just to kinda trick the Western media. But they cannot be tricked. As you can see, a lot of Russian activities recently are defense related. There's simply not too many reports about the Russian offensive, and they prefer to spend their efforts creating such provocations, such as for example the one in Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. And most likely the reason for this, it is because Russians themselves, they realize that their offensive capabilities are completely exhausted, and in the meantime Ukrainians almost fully received all this Western military support, and they are highly motivated to liberate their own territories. And this is what Russian authorities are trying to tell Putin, but most likely he does not listen, because knowing his nature, there is no way he will acknowledge that he was wrong, and his mind is still following the narrative that Russians are winning. What they basically say is that the chances of the Russian offensive are minimal. Ukrainians are about to attack fast and brutal, so Russians need to switch to defense and preferably even freeze this conflict. The very first person who started mentioning this was Yevgeny Prigozhin, and he was even making these hints whenever he was confronting the Ministry of Defense of Russia that Wagner simply does not have enough ammunition or anything like this. And even though Wagner was the only Russian military unit which was relatively successful in Ukraine, even Wagner right now fails. So the main claim of Prigozhin at this very moment is to hold the existing positions and try to defend them, instead of trying to capture something new. Another person who was potentially telling Putin to stop maybe was even the Minister of Defense of Russia, Sergei Shoigu, who is very close to Putin. But one of the biggest reasons why it still has not happened, it is because the Russian authorities are unable to deliver these messages to Putin clearly. They know how much upset he gets whenever he is told that he is wrong, and that is why they try to deliver this lie with some kind of sweetness, just to satisfy Putin. And as soon as there is some kind of signals of distress that Russia is actually in fact losing, I can only imagine it going as following. So Sergei Shoigu will be like, Vladimir Vladimirovich, we are not doing so good. I think we should stop offensive and switch to defensive. And then Putin will be like, what did you say? What was that last word? I didn't hear it. It does not register in my vocabulary. In response to that, Shoigu was like, no, don't worry. It was just like, I was just mumbling in my sleep. Yeah, my eyes were open, but I was just half asleep. Don't worry, we are doing good. Russia is winning. Let's proceed with the attack. So yeah, here is the dialogue editing, please, Michael. And because of this very same reason that even made Putin to initially invade, because his closest advisors were not able to tell him the truth, and they had to lie that Russia is prepared to take Kiev in 3 days, now basically the history repeats itself. And Putin, let's see whether he will take this decision to suspend offensive or not. In one way or another, he will be defeated. And I mean, it's no wonder. Ukraine already received the majority of the Western military equipment. Tens of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers have finalized their NATO training. Ukrainians already started demonstrating some kind of success in the south of their own country. And the massive ultimate counteroffensive will happen sooner or later. And as soon as it does, if you don't want to miss any updates, please consider subscribing to my channel. It only takes one click. The best way to support my channel will be through my Patreon. You can also become my channel member and unlock exclusive badges and emojis, or just simply use a PayPal link. Everything can be found to the right and down below. Thank you so much for your attention, товарищи, and see you tomorrow.